Howdy, folks. This is Dr. Matt Grieshop, Director of the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and you're joining us for Organic Chat. Today, our special guest is Assistant Dean of Advancement and External Relations, Russ Kabaker. He's here at the College of Agriculture, Food, and Environmental Sciences at the Cal Poly University. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, like with all our guests, I'll ask you some questions and we can have a nice conversation about our organic agriculture.
Terrific.
One reason why I was really excited to get Russ here is that long ago, before his current role, he worked for Grimmway and was kind of there at the beginnings of their organic ag. So, Russ, what are three or so things you think of when you're pondering organic agriculture?
So having the opportunity to really watch organic agriculture go from something that was very niche and not ubiquitous across the market to go to where we are today, and to see basically organics in every single marketplace store. It's not just your random farmers markets anymore, and so there's really been really when you look at the success of organics and what's transpired over those years, and how the public has really come to respect what that USDA seal stands for. I think it's a success in branding, and success two in showing what you can do when everybody gets on the same page for requirements across the nation, and that when you see that, it means something. It doesn't matter if you're standing in a California grocery store or you're in Arizona or Florida. That seal means something. You know that the methods of producing that product for you were very consistent across the board.
Yeah, that's great. Given that you had the rare opportunity to kind of see that transition, can you provide us with some context about your first introductions to organic agriculture?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. After completing my undergrad here at Cal Poly, I entered agriculture as a career and worked for, at the time, a very not super well-known carrot company called Grimmway Farms. This was in the mid-1990s. They were undergoing explosive growth with the new cut and peel category that became very popular with carrots.
So the baby carrots, right?
The baby carrots, yes. Cut and peel is the more kind of like accurate term. Baby carrots, and I'm sure everybody's, and I remember even back in those days when I would talk about the baby carrots, and we used to call them baby holes, actually. Oh. And people would say, so you harvest these little carrots at 2 inches, and then you have some kind of little lathes in there where you take the skin off. You must have this huge workforce, full of workers making that. And so cut and peel I tend to go to because it communicates that easier. But cut and peel carrots were really taken off there, and the history is really interesting. It goes back to Russ Son, which is a company, and baby whole / cut and peel carrots were something that was used in the freezer industry. So you'd take the undersized product that really didn't have a home in the what we call cellos, in the bagged carrots, and you take the undersized, so things that had a diameter 3/4 of an inch or smaller, and then you'd take those to a bean cutter.
Right.
And you'd cut them into 2-inch pieces, and you'd segregate out what we call the nubbins, all the smaller things that are under 2 inches, and then end up with this 2-inch product. And then you'd run it through like a potato peeler or a steam peeler in the freezer, and then freeze it. And so there was a guy who actually was my first boss at Grimmway, a guy named Kent Williams, who's now passed. And when he was at Russ Son, he came up kind of, I think, in a group about, hey, what if we tried to move this to the fresh market and made it a snacking carrot? And so he basically drove up and down the highways to all the different grocery store chains and tried to really get this market established in the late 1980s, early 90s. It caught on, and the rest is history, essentially. it was an interesting product because prior to the consumption of carrots, prior to the advent of the cut and peel carrot, essentially caused per capita consumption to increase threefold.
Yeah.
And so to have a category triple production nationally per capita consumption is pretty unheard of. So it was really a product that was a win-win from so many sides of things. One, you had shelf life, so you had 30-day shelf life on it. You took a bag of carrots that at the time was probably worth 50 cents for a pound of carrots in the grocery store, and now you moved it up to at the time about $1, right? Mm-hmm. So you doubled the use of that shelf space in the grocery store. So the retailers were very, very happy about, oh, I can get, double the amount of value out of my square foot on the retail. And then you also created a snacking carrot where you didn't have to, peel the carrot and things like that. So once that happened and that took off, then the whole focus became cut and peels, and it became a snacking carrot. And then I can tell you the stories about how organics kind of folded into that as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So you've got this, small to medium-sized carrot producer. There's this incredible shift in the market, and they're able to jump in and really capitalize on that. They start to grow, but they're still conventionally farming carrots. So what's the next piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It was almost like carrot wars, and this was all happening in Bakersfield in the early 90s. There was several carrot companies at the time. There was a company called Belridge Farms. There was Jurassic. There was Bolthouse. There was Grimway. There was Kernridge. And there was about two others at the time as well. And then also Peter Rabbit Farms down in Coachella Valley, and some producers up in the Salinas area. So it was kind of a big group, as you could imagine, and you'd see in any kind of commodities. One thing, as this shift was happening, Grimway Farms had a freezer facility, so they lined up a contract, a multi-year contract, to purchase all the undersized carrots from Bolthouse Farms. At cheap, like $50 a ton. Again, then when the market shifted and all of a sudden that became really worth a lot of money, Bolthouse could not get out of their contracts. So they literally had truckloads after truckloads of very low cost cut and peel material for years. And Bolthouse, in order to get in that category, had to grow additional acres so they could actually grow and get in the cut and peel game. What happened in then that next, say, 5-6 years is you saw consolidation. Grimway bought Belridge Farms. They bought Premier Packing. They bought Jurassic and Son in 1996, which brings us to organic carrots. So organic really was starting to get a little bit of a hold with Jurassic and Son in the mid-1990s. Again, this is the company that really invented fresh cut and peel carrots for the retail. So very innovative, and they were producing organic carrots and dabbling into that space. They literally had about 60 acres annual production of the organic carrots. And Grimway ended up purchasing Jurassic and Son in 1996, and so this organic program came across with that acquisition. And I happened to be working at Grimway during that time, and I was asked to go out and scout the fields and figure out if these organic carrots were just going to be all completely consumed by nematodes, if they were marketable, if we need to walk away from them, and to try to get some kind of an assessment. So I remember that at that time of the year they were growing carrots in Cuyama Valley, which is a valley that's about halfway between Bakersfield and Santa Maria. So I went out there, I met with their farm manager, we walked the fields, and at that time, organic production still really lagged a bit behind conventional production. The growing they were still learning of really how to deliver the nutrient needs of organics. You could tell the organic fields because the tops were always a little bit yellow. There was always a little bit more weedy. The uniformity, emergence was a little less than the conventionals. So I remember walking these fields and being really amazed that, wow, this is an interesting category. It looks like they're going to have a challenge with this. Flash forward, again, a little bit longer. there was a lot of debate within, even Grimway at the time about, wow, why would we want to take over this organic program? Because doesn't that make our conventional program look inferior?
Right.
And there was a lot of discussion, I have to tell you, about continuing that program and strengthening that program, or divesting that program and focusing on what was 99% of the business at the time. Well, the visionaries lived through, as far as Rod and Bob, and leaned into the organics and said, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We had some of the best growers in the country growing carrots every day, as well as our outside grower groups, and we leaned into it. One thing that I think my argument was to our farm manager at the time was, there's always the threat of losing conventional tools, right?
Yeah.
And having the ability to learn to do without was going to make us a better conventional grower at the same time.
Yep.
And so I remember creating that discussion and got some agreement with some of our managers at the time. But what was really interesting is, I look back at that point is really a defining point. Flash forward 3-4 years, now organics was blowing up.
Right.
And we had gotten our understanding of organics down. We had gotten really good at the nutrition side. We got really good at weed control. And I'd go through our harvest meetings that we'd always have on Tuesdays.
Okay.
And it'd bring out kind of the different folks from the different packing facilities, or the different facilities, and it was kind of the management group, and Bob Grimm would walk that, and we'd have samples from all the fields that are, say, going to be harvested in the next 6 weeks. And it was really interesting to see over time everybody admit and say, how come the organic fields look so much better than the conventional fields?
Right.
So, the thought was, with some of the challenges around nematodes, and the challenges around Pythium, and the challenges around cavity spot, and some of the diseases that are, plague carrot production, that if we went, and leaned deep in this organic side, that we would have major crop losses.
Right.
So, and it was something that never came to fruition. And again, this is learning with multiple year rotations,
right?
Really adding a lot of compost back to the soil and building the soils, and it really became kind of a little bit of the inside humor a little bit about the organic fields are looking better than the conventional fields, smoother, better color, etc.
Right. So, and that, of course, you mentioned, one of the things that you have to wrap your head around pretty quickly in organic production of annual crops is you have to rotate. If you grow the same crop over and over again, you're going to run into nutrient management problems, and then, of course, you're going to get eaten up by pest and disease. So Grimway, it sounds like, had to adopt a very intentional rotation. So I would guess that that's the moment when Grimway really became more than a carrot company, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I was with Grimway until right about 2000, and so during that time, when we really came to the conclusion that in order to be successful as an organic producer for carrots, we really need to be on at least a maximum of 1 out of 3 years in crop rotation. So then that became an issue. Okay, so if we own this ground or we're leasing this ground, what do you do with the other 2 years that you're letting that sit out or grow a different crop? And obviously you want to grow a different crop. You can throw a grain crop in there, sure, but what can you grow that you can actually make some return on your investment? And so that's where we started contracting. So we started contracting with processed tomato companies and growing organic tomatoes. We would contract with organic potato companies and maybe grow organic potatoes. And did a lot of that, say, in that zone. And then a few years after that, it was decided about, let's really start getting other crops that can be really key crops for Grimway. So onions really jumped in there. Onions became a very large crop for Grimway, organic onions, along with in rotation with the organic carrots. And then in 2002 or 2003, I believe, was when this producer that was just down the street, it was called Cal Organic, and it was Danny Duncan was the owner and founder of Cal Organic. And he was literally, I don't know, a mile from where Grimway's cut and peel processing facility was and other facilities on beautiful, great sandy ground there near the town of Lamont. And they worked out a deal and purchased Cal Organic from Danny Duncan about 2002 and 3. And then that brought in dozens of new crops. Then over the course of 2003, obviously to present day, that scaled to about 65 different types of crops that Grimway is growing. You go into a Whole Foods and you can almost look down that whole produce aisle and see Cal Organic represented. And it's really interesting to see that this all came from very humble debate beginnings about 60 acres of organic carrots in Cuyama. And this start. Are we going to keep this? We're not going to keep this. What's their vote? And now, I mean, it's really makes me have a lot of pride in what Grimway has done, and really pivoted from the largest, conventional carrot grower in the world to now the largest, specialty crop organic grower in probably the world, most likely.
Certainly vegetables, hands down.
Yes. So, and they keep growing and they keep getting better and better at nutrient management and the technology. And I know the Organic Center is obviously very thankful for that partnership and their expertise.
So yeah, we really grow at that 60 acres as well, what we're doing here at Cal Poly. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. Those are those bits of agricultural history that I think so few of us get to really experience, and they're so meaningful. And a big part of this podcast is trying to make agriculture a little less mysterious, particularly organic agriculture, to the average consumer, because there are great stories out there. We have great stories to tell. So I have one question about you with that history. So I know Jeff Huckabee has been a major force in the organic movement at Grimway. When did he join the organization?
So he and I overlapped for about 1 year.
Okay.
So I remember when we were able to get him from Bolthouse Farms at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so he joined us from Bolthouse, and we overlapped for about a year. And obviously Jeff has grown with the company to long time now CEO of the organization, and now part of the whole Grimway Farms enterprise, which represents multiple companies.
Yep.
They've done extremely well under his leadership, and now farming in about 15 different states. Organics in many different states now, so really they have got it figured out, and which is a real wonderful benefit to the consumer as well, of having organics year round, produced with all the stringent policy and following all the guidelines. Also, watching just the whole evolution of even learning how to do organics in Georgia or organics up in Washington. And, each climatic regime has its own unique challenges that you have to adapt to. So they really amazing growers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, I mean that, I think, learning about that history really convinces me that Cal Organic Grimway has just really had a massive role in accelerating organic.
Cal Organic, it was in and out, right? He had a certain product for 3 months of the year, and then it was like, okay, I'll switch to another product and grow another type of vegetable or fruit or whatever. When Grimway entered it, they wanted to put down year-round supply. And what was being asked for in order to take it to the extreme, the full inclusion nationwide in the grocery stores was really year-round supply.
Right.
And these grocery stores, they want to set up 52-week contracts for delivery of organic leeks or kale or whatever the product is. And the industry, I don't think, was scaled to that earlier on. You could go to a farmer's market or a co-op and things like that and find kind of what was available that day. But, with logistics and shipping and things like that, the more modern world we live in now, you can follow the sun. That's what these companies are doing, is they are following the sun. They are producing locally wherever the sun is at the right, time of the year for that particular crop. With Grimway following the sun from obviously Bakersfield, they're there a couple times, but when it's too hot, they go up to elevation in the surrounding mountains or to the coast of California. When it's too cold, they go all the way to the Imperial Valley or Yuma, Arizona, just north of the Mexican border. They're in Florida, they're in Georgia. When it's the summertime in California and it's too hot, they can also go up to Washington or Oregon. So it's really something to see how these companies have really scaled. And also, when you look at the price point, that's the other thing, Matt, is I remember when organics first were there in the 90s, and it's like, okay, here's a conventional celery for $1, and it's like the organic one was like $3.50.
Right.
It was just a multiple difference, and you had to be really, really dedicated to wanting to eat organics in order to make those price jumps.
And frankly, just financially able. I mean, again, I think I know there's a lot of debate in the organic community about big organic, small organic, but for me, it's that single parent living in Detroit or in Fresno or wherever, they should be able to access good, healthy, high quality organic produce too. And realistically, for them to do that, it has to become available through that larger food system. And that's really what companies like Grimway Cal Organic have accomplished, which I personally think is great, because getting healthy food to people is really what it's all about.
Yeah, and throw in the Braga Fresh in there,
Right.
and throw in Lakeside and all these different companies, Earthbound. I mean, we're really fortunate, and then the price point is pretty close now. I have to say, I shop at Trader Joe's a lot, and you literally will look and go like, 20 cents more, 30 cents more, and you got the organic. I'll take that any day.
Well, you can find it at grocery outlet,
Yeah.
discount grocery chain.
Yeah.
Probably when I go in there, I see about 50% of their produce is certified organic.
Well, that's the other thing that's happened, and I know Jeff shared that with me, but if you notice some of the big Kroger-ish chains, when it comes to something like leeks and some of these minor, Swiss chard and things, bunch spinach, whatever, they're doing away with the conventional side of it. It's organic or not.
Right.
So that is also interesting to see that they're not having that duplication anymore. Costco's another one.
Yep.
I think almost everything at Costco now is organic on the produce side. Not quite everything, but a lot
Pretty
of things.
close.
Yeah, pretty close. The green labels. You see those green labels, that show you. So yeah, you're right. Access is huge. To have those benefits.
Yeah. And that's not to say we don't need local production systems and local food outlets and everything. And I highly encourage. Folks who can afford it, support your local farmers. But the reality is, in a country of 350 million, we need more than that.
Yeah, no, there's. We're lucky in California, obviously, to have
lucky.
so many amazing local growers, big and small. I mean, in some
absolutely.
cases, our local growers are the big guys, right?
Yeah.
They're growing, 30 minutes away, 10 minutes away, and so. But obviously, if you're in other parts of the country, sometimes that local grower is really, really key to having something that's fresh, cut cool time, something that is, harvested yesterday and available for your stove, this afternoon or something like that. So definitely support your local organic growers.
Yep.
It's a great world we're living in to have these accesses to it. So
and
so what's next?
That's a great question. That's usually the last question I ask people. So what's next? What do you see as the big challenges and opportunities? So, what do you think's on the horizon? Obviously, we talk about this stuff pretty frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the industry has done a great job, and we talked about this at the beginning, of really being meaningful of what that USDA certification is, and what the roles that Omri has, and people have learned that, and it's really pretty solid. I think what we're seeing now is where organics was in the 80s and 90s, maybe early 90s, with everything everybody seems to be talking about is regenerative.
Right, the R word.
Yeah, the R word. And, I know that drives probably some of our friends a little nuts, because it doesn't have the same degree of very defined, cultural practices or inputs.
There's pretty much as many definitions as there are practitioners. Almost. Not quite, but there's almost.
Yeah. I mean, in some segments, for example, like this weekend, I was able to go to a regenerative discussion and presentation at Robert Hall Winery by a leader in that space, which is Kane Thompson, and they are regenerative organic certified.
Right.
Okay, so that means something. You can look that up. You can see what that means. One, they're following the organic USDA rules.
Right. That's the baseline for ROC. Yep.
Yes, and so I like that as a consumer. That means something. But there's also a lot of use the word regenerative, but don't have the certification. And then, it reminds me almost when I used to go to the farmers markets when I was a student here in downtown San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
And I'd talk to vendors that were selling things, and I'd ask them, I'd say, "Are you organic?" And they'd say, "No, we're better than organic."
Yeah.
Just believe me. And I was like, okay, well, I want to believe you, but what does that mean?
Exactly.
And then I would get a little concerned. I'm thinking like, well, they're really small grower, and, if they get a bad pest, that might be a crop destruction.
Right, that could be your farm.
That could be their payments for the year. That could be their salary for the year. Or would it not make a little sense? Well, or if it's cold, there's a cold snap. Let's just give it a little, UN30. Let's give it a little fertilizer. I like things that are certified, and that there's that people follow the rules, because there's punitive things if they don't. Right. And then there's that whole thing where people would say, we're not organic, but we're chemical free.
Right.
I'm like, well, what do you mean? What does that mean too? So
last time I checked, everything's made out of chemicals, right?
Right. So I do like that we have things that we can kind of put and have certainty with, and I think regenerative's working in that direction.
I think so too. But like you, my big concern is, depending on what sector of the food system you're in, that definition of regenerative really shifts. So if you go to the Midwest and you talk about grain and bean ag, well, suddenly you're really talking about no-till, which is a great production system, but it really relies on a lot of herbicide and then genetically modified crops that are resistant to that herbicide. And that, in some sectors, that's really the basis of a quote-unquote regenerative production system. But then flip side, you've got that ROC, which you talked about, and that seems to be, in the specialty crops like fruits and vegetables, seems to be gaining prominence a bit more, where, you're just building on top of organic. And it's almost like gold star organic, where, we really are, beyond just the basics for certification, we're taking these extra efforts to try to build soil health. So reducing tillage, which is a constant issue because of weeds and organics and those other factors. But it's a really interesting space to be in. It'll be interesting to see what settles out. The California Department of Food and Agriculture is actually in the process of releasing a definition of regenerative organic. They've had this workshop with a variety of folks from industry over the last year, folks from the public as well, not just industry. And it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. I know there's a draft definition, but I don't think it's been fully promulgated or voted on, or I'm not exactly sure how CDFA does that.
Yeah, I have heard it mentioned. I mean, we were both Matt and I were at the Organic Growers Summit here just a little more than a month ago, and it was in a lot of the panel discussions. The R word came up, at an Organic Grower Summit. Karen Ross did also reference
Right.
it, in her remarks, Secretary under the Secretary of California Department of Food and Ag. And so it'll be good. I think it'll be good to put some principles around
Absolutely.
what it means to say this and say that, and good on California, I guess, for jumping in early, like we did on the organics
We
too.
did. The state organic program
Yeah.
preceded the federal.
Yeah.
I mean, that we've led the way consistently in sustainable ag, especially in specialty crops.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably don't remember, but back when we had the state program for organics, and COF was the certifier on it. There was essentially a toolkit that what you could use, what you couldn't, and who were the certifiers and all that kind of stuff. But it differed from state to state.
Yeah, and certifier to certifier.
Yeah. For after my time at Grimway, I went into the genetics industry and worked for a company called Noonan's, Sunseeds Noonan's, and eventually owned by Bayer Crop Science. And there was we did a lot of work with different customers, and one of the rules was if you're growing organics, you have to use untreated seeds.
Right.
So you have to use seeds that do not have a standard treatment, which was Thyram and Roverol at the time, to really mitigate potential seed-borne diseases.
Yes, these are fungicides.
Fungicides, yes. And depending on the customer, a lot of our California customers obviously were really good. And they're like, do you have treated seeds? And if you didn't have treated seeds, they could still use it.
Right.
They had an exception in the original law that said if untreated seeds cannot be found, you can use treated seeds. And so that happens sometimes, but then you'd have, we worked through distributors and things like that in other states. And you'd know that there are all these people growing organics that you're doing business with, and you'd never once get a request for treated.
Right. They never say, "Hey, I want untreated seeds."
Yeah,
Right.
never once get I'd like to have untreated seeds. And then you would find out that some of the certifiers in these other states never even really had that in their rules
Yes.
at the time. So,
And of course, post 2002, 2003, when the National Organic Program really came to fore, the regulation is you have to use untreated seed and preferably produced from a certified organic outfit. But even to this day, if you can't find certified organic seed, you can use untreated seed. And actually, this is one of the big discussion points that's coming up for the next National Organic Standards Board meeting, which is end of April this coming year in Tempe, Arizona.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the company I worked for, we started doing organic production because at least what was being told at the time was like by 2010, by 2015, they're no longer going to have...
It's been a moving goalpost because scaling the seed industry has been just incredibly challenging.
It is, because let's take carrots, since we've been talking about carrots. We did it, but it's a real challenge. So in order to produce what they call root to seed production, so you have your inbred and you have your pollinator, and then that's how you make your three-way cross. You grow those roots typically in the Imperial Valley and harvest them in February, right? And then you cut the tips off, cut and leave a little bit of the tops. You take them up to the Pacific Northwest, you vernalize them, then you plant them in the soil in the spring, and they immediately bolt, right?
Right.
And then if the nick is right, bees will move the pollen from the pollinator to the inbred, right? And then now you harvest the seed from the hybrid. This gives me the inbred, which becomes the hybrid with that cross. And then that's what you do, right? So the question was, okay, we started doing organic seed production in the Northwest, but is that good enough? Do we also need to produce the roots in the Imperial Valley organically that are the roots that are going to go become, the seed crop? And it was like, it was hard to read technically because those are called stecklings. And so we would read the law and it'd say, okay, well, your stecklings should be produced. So we ended up doing that. So organically grown roots, then organically grown seed production. The challenge we had is the nasty lygus bugs.
Yep.
And lygus bugs mean poor germination rates. And nothing the grower wants more is a 75% germination rate when it should be 95% in some cases, depending on the species. And so we struggle with that. But I have to say it was really good because when we were learning again, to produce the seed organically during these years, all of our organic customers had to ask us and say, we want to buy this variety. we need it untreated, or if you have it organically. We're like, oh, we have it organically, but you're not going to be very happy.
No. There's a bit of a premium.
It's an 83% germination rate. So, yeah, and double the price. Yeah. So I can see why the struggle is still going on.
Oh, yeah.
Because the seed companies, have a lot of risk. And once, you have lygus infection, there's not much you can do. In that seed production, in those umbels, in the flowers.
And they are, true bugs like lygus bug are some of the most challenging pests for us to manage in organic systems. Weeds always take the number one spot for growers, but lygus bug in the strawberry industry, for example, similar insects in some of the orchard crops, and then of course in seed production they're the ones. They're just really, really tough to get without some of those conventional tools. So I'm not surprised. So you're going to pay double for something that's not quite as good in terms of germination.
Well, and what always scared people too is and potential for seed-borne diseases.
Right.
You can't really control those diseases in the field either.
Right.
A lot of the seed-borne diseases are going to start in the field, right? So if you do have your conventional program, you should be able to knock those down and not make sure it doesn't get passed on in the seed.
Right.
So the last thing an organic grower needs is buy low germination, infected seeds, and then have that to contend with as well. Yeah. So I can understand why the debate's still going on.
Oh yeah, and it will be for quite a while. I mean, scaling up that industry is no easy feat, and I mean, you put it out there. There's a lot of risk in it, so I suspect without some kind of insurance scheme or potentially federal subsidy or something like that, it's going to be really hard to get.
The good thing is
scaled.
It really does depend on species.
Yeah, that's
some
true.
species you should have no problem. I think working with lettuce is a self-pollinator, pretty dominant, and those are pretty easy. There's no insect involved in making those crosses. There's some crops that will fit very nicely to doing that, but there's other ones that will be a challenge. Your biennials are going to be a challenge.
Oh yeah.
Onions and carrots and other things like that. So
yeah, we have no trouble getting organic lettuce seed with the organic farm. That's easy, or transplants for that matter. So yeah. Well, Russ, thank you so much. This has actually been a fairly long organic chat.
Yay!
But,
all right.
It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for sharing your experience and perspective. Like I said, we've got such great stories to tell in agriculture, and hopefully this is one of the ways we can do that.
Appreciate it. Great to be a part of it, Matt, and thank you for your great service here at Cal Poly as well. And it's been a
Thanks for listening to Organic Chat. This podcast is recorded on the Cal Poly campus. Production provided by our production engineer, Mary Nascimento.